Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. So today is our first Cooking Well with Diabetes class. It's the first series, and what I want to let y'all know right now is this is a pre-recorded video, but we're gonna premiere this as a live. So if you have any questions during the video, feel free to ask and leave it in the comments, and we'll be sure to answer it in live time. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So today's Cooking Well with Diabetes class for lesson 1 will be covering all about carbohydrate foods. Today we'll discuss meal planning, preparing all your meals. We'll discuss high and low carbohydrate foods. Artificial sweeteners, we'll be covering a little bit about that. Eating some sweets in moderation, and also preparing foods and adapting recipes that contain fewer carbohydrates. So to start it off, here's just some general advice to help control your blood glucose. So the first thing that we can be doing to control our blood glucose is we can be planning our meals ahead. Doing this will balance the amount of carbohydrates you consume each day, and also getting a regular amount of physical activity. The American Heart Association recommends 150 minutes a week for adults, and that's basically just 11 minutes of walking in the morning and 11 minutes of walking at night, and that's a very achievable goal that all adults can reach. And the next thing, monitor your blood glucose levels regularly. So the more we're checking on it, the more we're aware, the more uh, we're consciously aware of how we're doing with our blood glucose. And last but not least, we need to make sure we're taking our medication as prescribed by our physicians. So these 4 things are key to controlling our blood glucose levels. So touching back on the first topic, which is meal planning, here's some general advice. Here are foods with less carbohydrates. These foods will have less effect on our blood glucose levels. So vegetables, meats, fats, and more specifically, vegetables that are non-starchy and lean meats and heart-healthy fats such as avocado, oils, nuts, seeds. These are the foods with less carbohydrates that are heart-healthy and good for us. And the reason I say this is because these foods not only are lower in carbohydrates, but they can be very beneficial for our heart health. Again, non-starchy vegetables, lean meats, and heart-healthy fats such as oils, nuts, seeds, and so forth. These foods have or contain less amounts of carbohydrates. Foods with more carbohydrates. So these foods have more carbohydrates, but again, some of these are actually good for us. Some of these are bad for us, and the foods that we should be consuming that have a significant amount of carbohydrates are whole grains such as whole grain bread, whole wheat rice, brown rice, um, corn, beans, legumes, which are, of course, if you can see on the first 2 slides, those are our starches and our breads, and then our fruits such as you name it, pears, grapes, bananas. These contain a little more carbohydrates, but again, these are healthy, these are good for us, we should be consuming these, but of course in moderation for people with diabetes. The next are optional. They're not very, a lot of these aren't very good for us, and we don't really necessarily need this, but these are also foods to be aware of that have lots of carbohydrates. So whenever you're eating cereal, or you're eating donuts or candy or anything like that, our milk, our sugars, and our desserts have high amounts of carbohydrates. So let's just be cautious of that whenever we're consuming any milk products or sugars and desserts. And again, foods with less carbohydrates, non-starchy vegetables, high fiber foods, meats and other proteins, and oils and fats. These have fewer amounts of carbohydrates than our other foods. So planning our meals to balance our blood sugar levels. This is very important and key to controlling our blood glucose levels. And the way we can choose and menu plan is through using a simple tool such as MyPlate. MyPlate is an excellent tool. As y'all can see, basically what MyPlate is, it's just a plate with a suggested recommendation of food intake. And as you can see in the screen, our food groups are vegetables, fruits, grains, protein, and of course a dairy source. Um, what we see here is 75% of our plate should be filled with whole plant foods such as fruits, vegetables, and grains. Those come directly from the ground. So primarily, we should be eating primarily plant-based with a little bit of protein. So again, this is how our plate should be looking whenever we're consuming our food. So this is a great handy tool that we can be doing to planning our meals ahead. So choose MyPlate. We can have a diabetes exchange list. So this is just basically a list that carbohydrate count or this and carbohydrate counting are just a list, a more beneficial list. Diabetics, and also there's a plate method. There's numerous ways to meal plan, but basically MyPlate it's a little easier to use just because MyPlate you can see physically, or you can visually see how you should be consuming your food, or how you should be planning out your food. So let me explain to you what the diabetes exchange list is. It's basically categorizing foods into 3 groups: carbohydrates, meats and proteins, and fats. This tells you the proper serving sizes for different foods, and this helps you get a variety of foods by allowing you to exchange foods within the group. So carbohydrate counting also uses food groups. You keep track or count carbohydrate servings, food groups with carbohydrates, starches and starchy vegetables, fruits, and milk. Each carbohydrate serving is equal to 15 grams, which is choice. So let me show you an example right here. So again, 1 carbohydrate equals 15 grams. So 1 carbohydrate equals 1 exchange equals 15 grams. So here you can visually see 1 small apple, an 8-ounce cup of milk, a slice of wheat bread, half a cup of potatoes, a third of a cup of rice, a third of a cup of pasta, half a cup of corn, half a cup of peas. These are all just examples to visually to get you to see what 1 carbohydrate choice is. It's about 50, and this is again equivalent to 15 grams. So starch and whole grain. So 1 serving of a starch or whole grain is equal to 15 grams. So once again, a slice of bread, a half a hot dog or a hamburger bun, or excuse me, half a hot dog or a hamburger bun. So in other words, not a hot dog, but a hot dog bun is a serving. Half a serving of an English muffin, 1/4 of a bagel, 1 of 4. This is about a serving size of a pancake, but 1 to 4 inch size of a pancake. I mean, a 1 4-inch pancake, 1 6-inch tortilla, a third of a cup of pasta or rice, half a cup of bran, 3/4 of a cup of unsweetened cereal, half a cup of cooked cereal, or 6 saltine crackers. So these are again starchy foods. So these have a little more carbohydrates. So these have a lot more carbohydrates. So the more you eat, the more carbohydrates you'll be getting in. Here's just some examples of a serving of a starch. So next we have starchy vegetables. Some vegetables have more carbohydrates and some have less. People with diabetes need to know which vegetables are high in carbohydrates and which are low in carbohydrates. Vegetables that have more carbohydrates are known as starchy vegetables. So here are some examples: a half a cup of corn, half a cup of potatoes, yams, sweet potatoes, winter squash, butternut or pumpkin, beans, peas. These all are starchy vegetables. So we need to eat, what do you call it? Just be cautious of whenever we're eating starchy vegetables, because the more we eat, the more carbohydrates we're taking, the more it affects our blood sugars. So again, we're not discouraging you from eating this. We're just telling you to be aware whenever you're making these decisions in your food choices. So fruit. The next thing we have that's carbohydrate, or that has quite a bit of carbohydrates. Fruit. So one small apple or banana, a peach, a pear, blueberries, strawberries, all types of fruits. Here are just all some types of fruits and examples of what a serving of fruits would be for each fruit. Because again, each fruit is different in size, but here we just have different examples. And again, one serving of these fruits is equal to 15 grams or one carbohydrate choice. So one small apple or banana, one medium peach, half of a pear or 4 ounces if you're not too sure, 3/4 of a cup of blueberries, 1 cup of raspberries, 1 and 1/4 cup of strawberries, whole strawberries, half of a large grapefruit, 1/3 of a medium cantaloupe, 1 cup of honeydew cubes, 1/3 of a cup of grape, cranberry, fruit blends, and prune juice, half a cup of orange, grapefruit, pineapple, and apple juice. So, as you can see right here, the serving is varied, but again, it's because they're different sizes and also different nutrition content. So, just be aware of this. So next up that we have higher amounts of carbohydrates in our milk and yogurt, or basically dairy products. So one serving of milk or yogurt, again, is a carbohydrate choice, but there's different serving sizes depending on if you get milk or if you get yogurt or what type of milk that you get. So here we can see each what do you call it? There's 3 subdivided groups of the milk categories. So the first group, 1 cup of fat-free milk, or the first group is in the 100 calories, the second group is 120 calories, and the next group is 160 calories, and each one is either fat-free, reduced fat, or whole milk. And of course, the more fat, the more calories it has. So 1 cup, or in the first section, 1 cup of fat-free 0.5% or 1% milk is equal to 1 serving of a carbohydrate. 2/3 of a cup of plain or flavored fat-free yogurt with a non-sweetener is also 1 serving. And the next group, we have the reduced fat group. So 1 cup of 2% milk or soy milk is a serving. 2/3 of a cup of plain low-fat yogurt is also a serving. For your whole milk, 1 cup of whole milk, half a cup of evaporated whole milk, 1 cup of plain yogurt made from whole milk. Each one is a serving, but at the same time, the calorie content is different. So again, the more fat you have, the more calories. The less fat you have, the less calories. So just be cautious of that. Whoops, got a little ahead of myself. So sweets and desserts. 1 serving of sweets or desserts is also 1 carbohydrate choice. So just be aware whenever you're choosing your sweets how much you can have. So whenever you have an angel food cake, okay, you're actually, it's what do you call it? 1/12 of that food cake is actually equal to 2 carbohydrate choices. Okay, so 1/12. Okay, so if you get a whole cake in a circle, and if you cut it into 12 pieces and you get 1 serving of that, that's 2 carbohydrates. 3/4 inch of glazed donuts, that's 2 carbohydrates and 2 fats. So half a cup of ice cream is 1 carbohydrate and 2 fats. Half a cup of frozen yogurt is 1 carbohydrate, and it could vary from no fat to 1 fat depending on if you get it fat free or not. Ginger snaps, that's 3 of those is equal to 1 carb. 5 vanilla wafers. It's a 1 carbohydrate and 1 fat. Next, we also have half a cup of fruit cobbler, which would count as 3 carbs and 1 fat. Second, we have crust fruit pie, which would be about 1/8 of an inch or an 1/8 slice of an 8-inch slice. That would equal to 3 carbohydrates and 2 fats. So as you can see, whenever you're choosing the desserts, fruit already has natural sugar in it, and when you're adding it to the cake, it becomes more. It counts for more carbohydrates. So just be aware of that. One pumpkin pie, one serving of a pumpkin pie, which is about 1/8 of a 8-inch slice, is 2 carbohydrates, 2 fats, and 2-inch square cake frosted is 2 carbohydrates and 1 fat. As you can see, some choices will also count as 1 or more fat choices. Remember that although these foods might be substituted for one of your other food choices, the foods on this list do not provide really any nutritional value, such as vitamins, minerals, like the fruits and vegetables or whole grains do. So just be aware of that. So next is the foods with less carbohydrates. Okay, so foods with less carbohydrates. These foods will typically have less effect on your blood glucose levels because, again, less carbohydrates means less effect on your blood glucose. Excuse me. So, and here we have again our vegetables that have more fiber and are non-starchy. Our meats, they typically don't have any type of carbohydrates, and neither do fats. So your oils, your nuts, your avocados, your seeds, these also don't have carbohydrates, but they do have fat, hence the name fats. So we'll start with non-starchy vegetables. So one serving of non-starchy vegetables is equal to 5 grams of carbohydrates. So a half a cup of cooked vegetables or vegetable juice or 1 cup of raw vegetables is equal to 1 serving of a non-starchy vegetable. And here are some of your examples: asparagus, broccoli, celery, carrots, cauliflower, cucumbers, and I'll let you kind of read out the rest, but basically these are our non-starchy vegetables. And the thing about non-starchy vegetables is, although they don't provide a lot of carbohydrates and they don't really have a lot of fats, these vegetables typically provide a lot of beneficial nutrients such as fiber, vitamins, minerals, and for example, a dark green leafy vegetable or a dark green cruciferous vegetable like broccoli, kale, spinach, things like that. Those have high amounts of cancer-fighting properties, and they have antioxidants. What antioxidants are basically, they're killing off the free radicals in your cells that are causing damage in them. So that's the good thing about eating non-starchy vegetables. So they have very few calories, they provide little to no carbohydrates, but they have a bunch of good nutritious properties found in them. So this is why it's important to be eating a bunch of these. So a portion versus a serving. Can someone tell me the difference, maybe in the comment section? And meanwhile, I'll explain that. So what is the difference? The difference between a portion and a serving is, a portion is the amount that we serve ourselves, or that we serve ourselves. A serving is the recommended portion based on the standard measure size. So one key to managing our blood glucose levels is to eat the proper amount of food. A portion, again, is any amount of food that we serve ourselves. A serving size is based on a standard measure, such as the MyPlate or the Diabetes Exchange List. A serving size can be measured by weight, measuring cups, measuring spoons, or other measurements. If you know the proper amount of food that is in the serving, you'll be able to, or you'll be better able to plan your meals to keep your blood glucose balanced. So how much is a serving, you ask? When you're first learning how much a serving size is, it's a good idea to actually measure your foods for a few days. This will give you a much clearer picture of what our serving should look like. Another way to estimate the serving of foods is to compare the servings with everyday household objects. Some common comparisons. So one slice of bread or a starchy vegetable is about the size of the palm of a woman's hand, as you can see here in the picture. One serving size of a fruit is about the size of a tennis ball or a small fist. So again, maybe the size of a woman's fist. And an 8-ounce serving of milk will fit into a small coffee cup. So that's about 8 ounces. And that's basically a general rule on how you can guesstimate what a serving is. So sugars and substitutes. Let's talk about sweeteners, including ordinary sugars. So there's sugars, there's sugar alcohols, and there's non-nutritive sweeteners. And we'll get into that right now. So ordinary sugars. I'll go ahead and let this play out and then I'll explain to you all. So as we mentioned earlier, people with diabetes can enjoy sweets and desserts in moderation. We just need to learn how to include them in our meal plan without making our blood glucose levels skyrocket. Sugar is known as a nutritive sweetener because it provides nutrients that our bodies use. There are many different types of sugars, and it's important that people with diabetes recognize sugar in all its forms. This will help us control our sugar intake to prevent the onset of complications. And if you can think of some, I mean, there's some on here, but if you can name others too. So ordinary sugars that you'll see every day are sucrose, glucose, and fructose. These are typically found in regular food. So you can find table sugar from the sucrose and raw sugar from sucrose. Glucose that's the main sugar that our body kind of makes itself, but it's also found in corn syrup, glucose syrup. Fructose is pretty much the most natural form. Fructose is pretty much found in our fruits, vegetables, and honey, and it's a natural sugar. So this comes naturally from our foods that we eat. High fructose corn syrup is composed of 42 to 90% of fructose, and this is typically this is not necessarily in its natural state because again it's what do you call it? It's corn syrup. So, and then honey is made up of glucose, fructose, and water. Lactose is found in milk and other dairy products. Maltose and dextrose, those are found in cereals and some baked goods. Sugar alcohols or polyols, such as sorbitol, mannitol, and xylitol, and those are non-nutritive added sweeteners. They're sugar alcohols. So sugar alcohols, compared to sugar, they're similar in bulk and texture, but they're fewer in calories per gram, they're less sweet, require little to no insulin, and do not promote cavities. These are absorbed more slowly and incompletely, and they may have a laxative effect. And the reason that is because again, it's not, what do you call it? It's not absorbed easily. It's absorbed more slowly and incompletely. So sugar alcohols are a form of a carbohydrate. Polyols are used in some dietetic products such as dietetic candy, ice cream, and gum. They're also found naturally in many foods such as vegetables, berries, and fruits. They're like sugar in that they have a similar bulk and texture and provide energy or calories. Polyols differ from sugar in that they are fewer in calories than regular sugar. Polyols contain about 0.2 to 3 calories per gram compared to sugar, which averages about 4 calories per gram. Other differences that polyols are they're not as sweet as sugar, and they are absorbed by the body much slower than the sugar. So again, this is not absorbed as easily. The good news is that sugar alcohols require little to no insulin for the body. They can help prevent cavities when you use them instead of sugar, such as in gum, candies, beverages, and snacks. However, if you add extra foods with these sugar alcohols, you can increase the number of calories you're adding per meal. A disadvantage of this is that they produce abdominal gas and have a laxative effect if you eat too much of them. So eat foods with sugar, alcohol, in moderation, and along with other foods in case your body does not tolerate them well. People with diabetes use dietetic foods that contain these. So if you're not already aware, this is something that can be used in replacement of sugar. Just be aware if your body is able to tolerate it as well. So the role of sugar in recipes. So I'm sure you probably already know this, but I'll again just reiterate and emphasize the reason why we use sugar in recipes. So what sugar does is, of course, we all know it adds sweetness, but it also increases the tenderness and adds moisture and imparts golden brown color and adds volume. So whenever you're making a cake or something, that's the role of sugar. When using artificial sweeteners in cooking, it helps to know that the role of sugar play in recipes. Sugar substitutes cannot give all these properties to food. That is why you cannot substitute only artificial sweeteners for the sugar in many recipes. Remember that a recipe is a formula. In some cases, an artificial sweetener cannot be used instead of table sugar. We need to follow the recipe directions exactly to make sure the dish turns out okay. In other cases, we can experiment to see what works and what doesn't. At first, you may want to follow the directions from there and learn how to make these substitutes generally. Another way to determine this, how much sugar substitute to use, is to follow the manufacturer's directions. You can find these amounts on the web, on the product labels, or in tested recipes. Sometimes you can substitute artificial sweeteners for all the sugar. Other times you might use artificial sweeteners for only part of the sugar. And some artificial sweeteners need to have citrus juice added to them to become more stable. So reduce sugar. Because sugar directly affects our blood glucose levels, it's important for people with diabetes to learn ways to reduce the amount of sugar in their foods. Most recipes will follow our diabetes meal plans, but some will contribute too much carbohydrates, making it difficult to include. If a dessert that you love contains way too much sugar, there are numerous ways that you can go about this. You can either cut the desserts as in a serving size in half. You can modify the recipe to make it healthier. You can you can cut it in, or you can do portion control and cut it in half, or you can modify the recipe, or you can just have little pieces of it and not necessarily eat the whole thing all at once. So again, cut desserts, the serving size in half, or only eat a part of it. So cutting sugar in recipes. You can reduce the sugar in recipes by 1/4 or 1/3. You can add extra flavoring / spices to enhance the flavors instead of sugar. Increase vanilla by unsweetened frozen fruit or fruit canned in water or its own juice to give it more sweetness instead of the sugar. Or add prune puree or applesauce. Or replace all or part of the sugar with a low-calorie sweetener. You can substitute sugar-free pudding or non-fat dry milk for 1/4 of the sugar in a cookie, for example, or cake and bar recipes. You can use diet soda for some liquids, and Again, these are all just to modify and put less sugar into your cakes or desserts. And so for recipes online, you can visit all these websites. All these are good resources, or if you have a specific recipe, dessert that you like making, you can just search it online and try to find out, oh, how can I make this healthier? Or how can I make this to where there's not as much sugar? Things like that. So that concludes this session, but I would just like to leave out with some key points. So again, whenever we're choosing the foods that we eat, make sure we're being conscious of the carbohydrates that we're consuming. Make sure the carbohydrates that we're consuming are the good carbohydrates. So the carbohydrates that, like, from the fruits, vegetables, and whole grains, like whole grain bread instead of white bread, brown rice instead of white rice, vegetables like corn, rice, beans. These are good carbohydrates that we can be consuming, or that we should be consuming more of, versus the cakes, the candies, anything that's not too good for our bodies, but we still enjoy eating. We can still have them, but in smaller amounts, or we can modify them to make them healthier. So again, these are just some of the key I would like to leave off with y'all. And I thank y'all so much for tuning in the whole time. If y'all have any questions, please feel free to ask, and we can help y'all.